With the RAF down to one Hurricane, the plan is to stand down for the day and wait it out until tomorrow, when our reserve pilot will be activated, and we have a fighting chance to combat the larger German raids now coming across the channel. With Thameshaven bombed yesterday, there is no way the RAF can repair enough London hexes to reduce the size of the raids before the scenario is over. Our only recourse is to throw as many RAF planes in the air as we can and hope for the best. Since the RAF will be standing down all day, we'll speed through the daylight phases and simply focus on the German raids and their targets. We begin the August 17 turn, but before we deal with the raids, we must remove Me-110 No. 13 from play, the dive bomber variant. With that, we begin the day's raids. At 7 a.m., the Germans mount a 5-plane raid, but we add another raider due to the damage in London for a total of 6, flying at 20,000 feet. The raid makes its way to Dunkirk radar and bombs it with 5 points of damage, lowered to 3 points due to all damage being halved, rounded up for radar sites. The Germans score another victory point. 10 a.m. The remixed chit is drawn, so we place all current chits back into the container and draw again. And no raid is mounted. 2 p.m. The remixed chit is drawn again, so back into the cup go the chits once again. And another no raid chit is drawn. 5 p.m. The Germans end the day with a large raid, 7 raiders flying at 15,000 feet. The raid makes its way to Manston Airfield and bomb it with 6 points of damage, with 1 point removed due to heavy anti-aircraft fire, which makes the final total 5 points. The Germans score 2 more victory points, for a total of 20. The night phase begins, and the RAF use 1 repair point to bring down a damaged London hex to 2 points. The rationale for this choice is that during the night phase tomorrow, we'll be able to use the RAF's 2 repair points to completely repair this hex and knock off 3 victory points for the Germans. The other repair point is used to fully repair West Malling Airfield, which brings the German victory points back down to 18. Holmwood also recovers 2 fatigue points and is now fully rested. He will need it for tomorrow. It's now August 18th, the last turn of the short scenario. We receive a replacement Hurricane pilot, Drake, who will fly the No. 2 aircraft. The 7 a.m. phase begins. Holmwood and Drake begin the day flying patrol over Rye radar at Angels 20. And the Germans are also up this morning with a 5-plane raid. We roll for raid placement and for the reported altitude, which is 15,000 feet. The raid gets a free movement as one of the radar sites is damaged. The RAF moved to a position to jump the raid from out of the sun as it moves further inland. And as expected, the raid skirts the obvious target at Limp and heads further inland. The RAF wastes no time as both pilots bore in on the raid at Angels 20 and from out of the sun. The raid is revealed, and it's 3 bombers and 2 109 escorts, one of which is an ace. We roll for the true altitude, and the entire raid is moved down 1 space to 10,000 feet. But the RAF get a lucky break, as all odd-numbered escorts fly top cover. This puts the 109 ace at 15,000 feet, and able to be intercepted by the RAF. Both RAF fighters target the German ace pilot. Holmwood takes first crack at the 109, diving from out of the sun. And this time, Holmwood bests the performance check, with a final total of 13, while the 109 Ace rolls a 9. Before we attack the 109 Ace, there is a quick clarification I need to make. It was brought to my attention that while the Germans may attack with a maximum 3 bursts, no such limitation is present for the RAF. The rules do confirm this, so the RAF are free to fire as many bursts as they please. In this case, Homewood will fire 3 bursts. This 109 needs to be brought down. So he fires a long burst at the German fighter and scores 5 hits. The 109 is shredded by Homewood, and the bandit is destroyed. The 109 is placed in the destroyed box, and, in what seems like an eternity, the RAF score a victory point. We mark off 3 bursts for Homewood and award him another kill. Both RAF pilots are now at 15,000 feet. But there is still another 109 in the raid, and he chooses which RAF fighter he will attack. A roll of 5 means the 109 will go after Drake in Hurricane number 2. However, he will be climbing to attack, so we add a -2 to his performance check. And the 109 fails to get into position, with the final totals being 11 for the Hurricane and 9 for the 109. We now roll for the next combat round, and a roll of 5 takes the combat to round 2. Both RAF pilots will remain in the fight, and both will go after the 109. The more fighters we destroy now, the fewer we will encounter in subsequent raids. Homewood goes after the 109 first and maneuvers into position, but fails to get a bead on the 109 with a total of 6, while the 109 rolls a 9. Drake goes after the German fighter next, and also fails to get into position on a total of 6. The 109 finishes with an 8. The 109 chooses his target and will go after Homewood. Drake is unengaged, so we add a +1 to Homewood's final performance roll. And the Hurricane just manages to evade the 109 on a total of 9, while the 109 finishes with an 8. We roll for another round of combat, and a 6 moves the combat to round 3. Both RAF pilots will go after the 109 once again. Homewood maneuvers first, and the 109 gives Homewood the slip once again on a final roll of 9, while the Hurricane finishes with a 7. Drake takes his turn against the wily German fighter, and the German's luck finally runs out. Drake finishes with a 10, while the 109 bottoms out with a 7. Drake is allowed 3 bursts, which he gladly fires, but only manages 3 hits. But his fire is accurate, as the pilot is killed and engine hit, and the last 109 is shot out of the sky. We add another fighter to the destroyed pile, and the RAF receive another victory point. We mark off 3 bursts for Drake and award him his first kill. We roll for the final round of combat, and the remaining raid manages to slip away on a roll of 1. Both RAF pilots land at Hornchurch, and the German raid continues on, and finally makes its way to the sector airfield at Biggin Hill. The Stukas drop down to 5,000 feet and blast the field with 2 damage points, while the medium bombers follow up with another 3 points, for a final total of 5. The Germans increase their victory points to 20. The 10 a.m. phase begins, and the RAF are back in the air over Rye radar at Angels 20. And the Germans return again with a total of 6 raiders. And the Germans attempt a low-level strike coming in at a reported ground level. The Germans get a free move due to radar damage. The RAF drop to Angels 5 and maneuver behind the raid to position themselves up Sun. The Germans fly past Limp and further into the English countryside. The RAF continue tailing them. The Germans continue inland, but the RAF considered that far enough. In a risky move, they bore into the unrevealed raid at Angels 5 and attempt an out-of-the-sun attack. The raid consists of 3 medium bombers and 3 fighters. We roll for the actual altitude, and the raid remains at ground level, but 2 fighters are moved to top cover, negating the out-of-the-sun attack. The RAF decide to fight it out once again. Homewood will go after the 110, while Drake goes after the 109. We roll for Homewood's performance check, and the 110 gives Homewood the slip on a final roll of 9, while the Hurricane rolls a 6. Drake maneuvers against his 109 and manages to get into firing position on a final total of 10, with the 109 scoring an 8. The Hurricane is allowed 2 bursts and manages 2 hits. The 109's engine is hit and the pilot wounded. We mark off 2 bursts for Drake's Hurricane. Control now switches to the Germans. Drake's damaged 109 must break off with engine damage. But the 109 will not make it back home because of flying at low altitude and crashes a short distance away. Another fighter is added to the destroyed aircraft, and the RAF receive another victory point. Drake is also credited with his 2nd kill. But the 2 remaining German fighters are still in the fight, and they roll for their respective targets. The 110 will go after Homewood, and the 109 will climb to attack Drake. We roll for the 109 attack first, and Drake easily evades the German fighter on an 11, with the 109 scoring an 8. The 110 goes after Homewood, and he manages to outmaneuver the big fighter with a total of 9, while the 110 scores an 8. We roll for another round of combat, and a 5 moves the combat to round 2. The RAF will go another round with the Luftwaffe fighters. Homewood re-engages with the 110, while Drake attempts to drop another 109. Homewood maneuvers against the 110 and once again fails to get into position. Drake attempts to come to grips with his German foe, and he too fails to get into position. With the tables turned, the Germans select their targets. The 110 will go after Drake, and the 109 will attack Homewood. The 109 maneuvers against Homewood, and this time gets Homewood dead in his sights on a final roll of 11 against the Hurricane's 6. The German fires 3 bursts at the Hurricane and riddles the British fighter with 5 hits. Homewood is killed in the hail of gunfire. The destroyed British fighter is placed into the destroyed aircraft box, and the Germans receive another victory point. The 110 maneuvers against Drake, and the German manages to get on the tail of the shaken Drake with a final score of 9, with Drake receiving a 6. The 110 fires the maximum 3 bursts and scores 4 hits on the fighter. Drake is wounded and his engine destroyed. Drake attempts to bail out of his doomed fighter and successfully does so. We also roll on the wound outcome table, but Drake does not survive and dies of his wounds. The raid continues on, and arrives over a third London hex. With barrage balloons in place, the raid is forced up to 10,000 feet. The heavy anti-aircraft also knocks off a point of bomb damage, for a final total of 3 points. The Germans receive 3 more victory points, and the London's burning tracker is increased again. Now, we will add 2 raiders to every future German raid. But with the RAF completely neutralized, there is little point in continuing. The Germans have won a solid victory, even when removing 3 German victory points during the night phase, when we would have repaired one of the London hexes. We'll leave the final score as is. I hope you enjoyed my playthrough of London's Burning, even though the Germans won a resounding victory, and that you now have a good idea of how the game plays. In my experience, I found the short scenario can be the most challenging, as every day brings opportunity for German raids. The longer scenarios, which I usually play, can be a tad more forgiving, as weather effects come into play, with those rainy days giving the RAF a chance to catch its breath and repair damage. The game will throw some curves at you, as seen by this campaign's focus on Luftwaffe raids hitting London many times, scoring many points for the Germans and increasing their raid size, while the RAF struggled to get all their planes in the air. On average, the Germans tend to focus on the coastal targets first before moving further inland, but not this time. Also, there were many out-of-the-sun attacks that went nowhere, negating the RAF's effectiveness. But the good news is that bad dice rolls will no longer be an issue, as I now have my first dice tumbler. With this timely purchase, I'm confident all my future die rolls will improve, and further playthroughs will end in victory. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk again soon.